So last week I spoke about the degree of responsibility that a person bears not to infect others, not to transmit the disease to others, and if he did so, does he bear liability? And I just shared a shaila with you, probably the most painful shaila I dealt with in this entire period, when a person turned to me and he feels that he brought about indirectly the demise of a Jew. Person working in a nursing home. One of his family members had COVID-19, had corona, but he felt well and he took all the precautions, wearing a mask and keeping 2 meters away from others, even 3 meters. But after a few days, he fell ill, and what's far worse, some of the people in the institution fell ill, and one of them died. So we could never know with certainty that he is the one to blame, because some other people working in the facility also came down with corona. But brokenheartedly, he turned to me. What is it he needs to take upon himself, and how could he guarantee mechila, slicha, v'kapora? So I just shared the story with you, but I did not share what my tshuva was. And many people turned to me throughout the week, and they are very eager to know. So, what was the tshuva? Why do you give us a shaila without giving us the tshuva? The reason I gave the shaila is because I thought it was just important to know that this could happen. But so many people wanted to know what my response was, so I will share with you my response. And this opens up a fascinating sugya. The sugya of tikkunei tshuva. We know that according to the Rambam and many other Rishonim, it's a mitzvah to say to do tshuva. If you did an aveda, you got to do tshuva. Some argue that according to the Rambam, tshuva is a privilege, it's not an obligation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the opportunity to do tshuva, but if you choose not to do, don't. But bear the consequences. My opinion, as I made very clear in Minchas Osher Chumash Devorim, everybody agrees that tshuva is a chiyuv, not only a mitzvah, a chiyuv. But that's not the topic we will be discussing today. What I want to discuss is the concept of tikkunei tshuva. When a person is over an aveda, besides crying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking for forgiveness, expressing profound regret and remorse, does he need to take upon himself Yisurim? Does he need to fast? 3 times in Shulchan Aruch we find this concept in the Ramah. Shein Lamed Dalet Sif Chavav regarding Chilul Shabbos. The Ramah says if you are Machal Shabbos B'Shogeg, you need to fast 40 days for each Chilul Shabbos. We move on to Yoredeya. Kuf Chav Gimel Sif Chavav. B'Shogeg, if you drank Yayin Nesach, you need to fast 5 days. Instead of 40, he's down to 5. Kuf Pehei Sif Daled in Yoredeya. Hilchas Nida. If you're a Nichshal Bebias Nida B'Shogeg, shoots up to 40 days again. 40 days. Where do these numbers come from? 40 days for Chilul Shabbos, 40 days for Bias Nida, 5 days for Yayin Nesach. These numbers come from Sefer HaRokeach, taking us back almost 1,000 years. So the most explicit source in the concept of Tikkunei Tshuva is Sefer HaRokeach. We also find it in Sefer Hasidim, but Sefer HaRokeach twice, Hilchas Tshuva, and at the end of Hilchas Rosh Hashanah, has a very, very detailed list. How many tzomos do you need to fast on various different avedas? And the Ramah, 3 times in Shulchan Aruch, nowhere in the Beis Yosef. So Gedolei Sfarad weren't into this. We do find that Yisurim Amarkem Avoynes Shalodam, and Yom Daf Peivav Dalet Chalukah Kapora. So Chayve Koras, Chayve Mises Beis Neina Meskapra Melidei Elo Al Yedei Yisurim. But the Pshat in the Gemara is Yisurim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you a chaperoven. But do we find in the Gemara that a person needs to take upon himself Yisurim and inflict pain on himself or fast l'chaperovain? We do. We actually do. I remember at least one source, and that's in Kiddushin Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis. Rav Chia bar Ashi was nichshal behirhurei avera. He didn't actually do anything. He didn't act out what he just had a taiva. And when he came home, he went into a burning furnace to just inflict pain on himself. So I think that is probably the earliest source. But we do not find in the form of Gedolei Sfarad a detailed list and system. How many days do you need to fast to atone for different Avedas? But we do find that in Gedolei Ashkenaz, the great Kabbalist, the Mekubalim of Gedolei Ashkenaz, as I quoted, and we find it 3 times in Remo, in Shulchan Aruch. And when a person unintentionally, b'shoigig, brought about the demise of another person, the poskim are machmir yoisa. So in the Remo we find it regarding Chil Shabbos, Bias Nida, and Yayin Nesach. But in Sefer HaRokeach he writes that a person brought about the death of another person, he needs to fast 40 days, and he needs to take upon himself golus, exile. And for an entire year, he needs to leave his home. He needs to be na v'nad ba'oretz, and not sleep 2 nights in the same bed. Which means he needs to leave his home, roam the cities and towns incognito, and every night look for somewhere else to sleep, and additional Yesurim and Segufim which he takes upon himself. So, all the Avedas Shebenodam Lamokoim, if you're over b'shoigig, you're all familiar with the halacha. You bring a korban chatas and that's it. You say vidui and a korban chatas and that's the end of it. But a hoirig nefesh b'shgogo is chayav golus. And the Sefer HaChinuch explains in Mitzvah Tov Yud, because hoirig nefesh is a bigger aveda than all the others. And I think it makes so much sense. It makes so much svara, because aveda shebenodam lemokim, it happened. I meant no evil. I had no bad intentions. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is moicha v'saleach. If you brought about the death of a person, you had no bad intentions. But that is a life you could never bring back. And that is why you're chayav golus. Minchas Osha Mesechet Makas Melamed Dalad. I dealt with the Marsha. Yudo mit Beisa Mesechet Makas. The Marsha says that golus, hoirig nefesh b'shgogo, has nothing to do with kapora. It's all about just safeguarding the Ritzeach from the Goyal Adam. He goes to the Iyam Miklot in golus, and the Goyal Adam can't hurt him. But that's against the Gemara and Makas Beisa mit Beis, and it's against Toisus and Makas Yud Aleph in the Beis. So Pashtus Advorim, Sefer HaChinuch is right. Hoirig nefesh b'shgogo is in a far worse situation than a person that was Chal Shabbos b'shoigeg or Bor Anida b'shoigeg. And if the poskim, the Ashkenazi poskim, are machmir, even be'averi shebenodam lemokaim b'shoigeg, shetzorech tikunim kal v'choymer ben beno shel kal v'choymer, when a person brought about the demise, the death of another person, even though he had no bad intentions. So let's just look around and see how the Gedolei Adoros, how the great sages of every generation dealt with these questions. And I want to bring about 6 or 7 sources before we wrap it up and summarize the sugya. And I'll share with you what my psak was at the end of the day. Chuvas Maharivail, going back 650 years, Maharivail was a Talmud of the Maharil. And a Siman Kuv Chav Hey, the Marivail brings that a person sent one of his workers, an agent, to deliver something, to do something for him. And the person died in the way. And this could happen. It could happen. There was a car accident. So the balabos that sent him in no way is to blame. It just could happen any day. anytime, to anyone. But Marie Weil, Rabbi Yankov Weil says, but he was your shaliach, and you sent him on this fateful journey, and therefore you need a kapor. Chuvas Marie Weil, Siman Kuf Chof Hey. He brings a raya from Sanhedrin Tzadikei Omed Aleph. Tzemach Tzedek, Siman Vav, rejects the raya. But the psak of Marie Weil is, he needs to fast 40 days. 40 days. That's based on Sefer HaKech. 40 days is a magic number of Tani Yislacha Perovin. I quoted 2 times the Yoredeya and Orachaim, that are more 40 days for Chil Shabbos and for Bias Nida. So Marie Weil paskins 40 days and tzedakah. And if the person who lost his life is his family, is in need, support his family. And that's your kapara. That's Shuvas Mahari Weil. Tzemach Tzedek. There are 2 very well-known Sforim with the same name, Tzemach Tzedek. The later Tzemach Tzedek is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Menachem Mendel, who was one of the greatest Gedolim of his time, and the Divrei Chaim calls him one of the greatest Gedolim of our time. But I am quoting the earlier Tzemach Tzedek, who lived 200 years before the second Tzemach Tzedek. Siman Vav, Siman Tzaddik Gimel. And in Tzaddik Gimel is a lengthy tshuva. And he deals with a tragic story which he describes in great detail. So a person went out on his way to do some business with a young boy that was working for him. It was the middle of the winter. And it was a tragic mistake because it was snowing, it was very cold and very windy, but nevertheless they went on their way. On the way back, it was nightfall, and it became even colder and even windier, and the snow became heavier. And they had great difficulty, and they were freezing. On the way home, they just knocked on the door of a Gentile, of a non-Jew, just to ask him for Rachmanis, if he could take them in. And he was very nice to them. He took them in, and they drank some hot tea or whatever it is. And he offered them to stay overnight till the storm would be over. Tragic mistake number 2. And the person decided, no, we're going to try to get home. We're going to make it. And they left his home on their way. In the middle of the way, the young boy said, I don't have any koyach. I can't go on. Leave me here. Go get some help. Maybe tragic mistake number 3. He left the lad there. He left the boy there. And he barely made it home. Probably he was delirious when he got them. And he couldn't describe to the people exactly where he left that boy. They looked for him, but they didn't find him. By the time they found him the other day, he was no longer amongst the living. So this person asked for a kapora from the Tzemach Tzedek. So on one hand, the Tzemach Tzedek says, you're not to blame. What could you do? You didn't mean bad. Well, he didn't mean bad, but I think he made more than one tragic mistake and bad judgment. But the psak of the Tzemach Tzedek is based on Marie Weil. He brings Marie Weil. You need to fast 40 days. But you also need to fast first year, every Sheni B'Shabbos. Besides the 40 days, Sheni B'Shabbos for the entire year. And all his life, he needs to fast Aseh Mitzvah, Bahab, and Yom Kippur Kodesh. That's quite a harsh psak. I think it's justified because this person had a young boy with him. He should have been more responsible. I think his conduct was probably reckless, but that's the psak of the Tzemach Tzedek. Tshuvas HaRamah, going back 500 years. I didn't know they had guns in the days of the Ramah. Very primitive guns that used firepower and lead balls. And the Ramah describes a person that was sitting in a wagon, and a young boy was out there in the front taking care of the horses, and he played with his gun, and unintentionally he shot the boy in the head, and the boy died. And the Ramo once again says, didn't mean any bad, but he brought about the demise of a person, and therefore he needs tshuva 40 days. And the chiddush we find in the Ramo every year, from now till the end of his life, and that day in which this tragic event happened, and he caused another person to perish, he needs to fast that day till the end of his life, besides 40 days that he needs to take upon himself to fast. Ponameiros, fast forward more than 100 years. Ponameiros Chelak Aleph Siman Pei Hey, Tshuvas Aramos and Siman Lamed Zayin, Chelak Aleph Siman Pei Hey. And in the days of the Ponameiros, once again, a firearms accident. And this happens. It's tragic, reckless, but it happens. Happened many times in Israel. People were playing with a gun. So number one, pull the trigger, nothing happened. Number two, pull the trigger, nothing happened. Number three, pull the trigger, and he killed one of his friends. That's the story in the Ponameiros. And once again, the Ponameira says, he's an oines. What could he do? His two friends did the same and nothing happened. Well, today we know how careful one needs to be with firearms. It's quite common that people ask me, should I buy a gun or not? And recently, about 20 people asked me in America, after these anti-Semitic events and attacks in shuls, so many people turn to me, should I buy a gun? And my response is usually, statistically, more people die from friendly fire. And I don't mean friendly fire in warfare. More people die within the family from accidents than terrorists that are shot by private people that have guns. So what I usually say, if you're really responsible, and you're not a meshuggah, and you are a responsible person that cares for his family, and you know how to handle a gun, I think yes. You might just have the schus to be at the right time, in the right moment, in the right place, to save Jewish lives, to save lives in general, and to kill a terrorist, especially in Israel, when terror attacks are far more common than in America. But anyway, accidents with guns, to our dismay, are common. And people need to know the awesome responsibility if you have a firearm. So that's a story in Tshuvas Aramo, that's a story in Tshuvas Ponameiros, Ramea Eisenstadt, going back 350 years on the Ponameiros. Once again, brings the Ramo, and he says, every year that day, 40 days, year number one. And now this brings us to two fascinating tshuvas. Each of them is a gewaldige chiddush, one lekula and one lechumra. And these tshuvas are the greatest gedolim of their generations, the Maharshal and Maharam Melublin. You probably all know the Marsham and the Maharam Melublin are neighbors. Well, they weren't really neighbors. The Marshal didn't live close to the Maharam Melublin, but they're neighbors in the Vilna Shas. So the Marshal is on top, and the Marshal and the Maharam are right next to each other. Tshuvas Marshal Siman Tzadik Zayin. A lengthy story. And as the story is told, a young Jewish boy started up with some goyim. He did something to offend them, and they were chasing him to beat him up. And Reb Moshe Lipschitz happened to be there. He wasn't part of what happened, of the event. He happened to be there, and he was afraid that the goyim might kill that young Jewish boy. So he intervened, and he told them, leave it to me, I'm going to punish him. He's did a terrible thing he shouldn't do, and leave it to me. I'm going to take care. And they agreed. So the Moshe Lipschitz was chasing that boy. I don't know how old the Moshe Lipschitz was, but he wasn't getting very far, and the boy just outran him. And the goyim were there. So the Moshe Lipschitz turns to those goyim that were hurt, and he told them, "You go catch the boy and bring him to me." Probably it was a mistake. And they chased him, and he ran away, and he fell to his death. And Moshe Lipschitz came to ask, "Ma kaparosi, ma tmurosi, ma chalifosi, what am I supposed to do?" Indirectly, without any bad intentions, in a way he was involved, and he brought about the death of that boy. So the Mashal first writes, "You are not to blame. Reb Moshe had good intentions. He did the right thing. He wanted to save that boy and not to hurt him. And therefore he's an oines rachmona patre." The Mashal also writes an interesting argument, and he writes, we want people to take the initiative. We want people to mix in. We want people to try to save one another and to care for one another. So if you see Goyim chasing a Jew, you should try to do something, and we don't want to scare them away. And therefore, Mishum Tkonas Hashovim, Ein Lahachmir Olav. So surprisingly, regardless of the Marivail and the Sefer HaRokeach and the Ramah, well, the Ramah was a Ben Dori of the Mashal. They were the same. They were contemporaries. But regardless of all the others, the Mashal writes he needs no kapura whatsoever. Forget it. No kapura. Which is interesting because, in a way, I don't know whether the Moshe was irresponsible, but in retrospect, maybe he went too far to tell the Goyim, chase him and catch him and bring him to me. That's the story. Maharam Milublin was about 50 or 60 or 70 years younger than the Marshal, Simon Mem Daled. A different story. So the story is about a Gadol B'Yisrael, a great Talmid Chacham. Besides, his name was Rabbeinish, and we know nothing about him. But he gave a psak regarding a youngster. And a relative of that youngster came to the Rav's house, to the Dayan's house, just to speak on his behalf and try to explain to the Rav, maybe there's room for more leniency, and he just came to talk to the Rav. The Rav looked out of the window and he saw him approaching, and he became hysterical and he was afraid. He thought the person is coming to hurt him or his family. So we don't know who that person was. Maybe he was a bully. Maybe he was, a violent person. We wouldn't know. But as the story is told in Shuvas Maram Lublin Mem Daled, the Rav was terrified, so he locked the door, and he tried to schlep a very heavy cabinet to put it behind the door. The person shouldn't be able to break into his house. And obviously the cabinet fell on him and he was injured, and after a few days he died. And the person that was on the way to the Rav's home once again asked for a kapora. Maram Lublin quotes the Marshal. And the Marshal writes he's an oines and he deserves no punishment and he needs no kapora. And what's surprising is that the Maram quotes the Marshal, and Afal Piken, the psak of the Maram is quite surprising and quite harsh. And the psak of the Maram Lublin is 10 things he should do for kapara. Quite a harsh list. So after the Maram quotes the Marshal, and the Maram writes, he's an oines and he's potter. If I need to judge these two stories, I think Reb Moshe Lipschitz bears far more responsibility than Ploni Almaini, that just was walking to the Rav's house and all he wanted was to talk to him and to plead with him. So the Marshal is extremely lenient and he says he needs no kapora. Maram Lublin quotes the Marshal, but he also quotes Marivail, and this is his psak. Just take note. He needs to fast 40 days of Ritzufim, which means 40 consecutive days, excluding Shabbos and Yom Tov. 40 days B'Zeh Chazeh, which means you eat by night, but you fast every day. After that, 3 days every week for the first year. 3 days. That means a half a week for the entire year. And the night before the fast, lo yishte yain v'lo yochel basar, like an oinen. Number 3, he should sleep an entire year without a pillow, besides Shabbos and Yom Tov. Weekdays, he should sleep without a pillow. Number 4, he shouldn't wash his body or his head for the entire year, only once a month. Quite tough, especially the way we live today. Lo yechetz gufoi v'lo yochef roishoi, elo pam achas b'chodesh, for an entire year. Number 5, which we would find very repulsive and intimidating. He needs to lie on the floor in the entrance to the shiur. When people come and when people leave, they should step on his body as they enter the shiur and as they exit. If I would be in that shiur, I would just try to hop over his body, because the Maram Alablin could paskin that he needs to lie on the floor, but he didn't paskin that we have a mitzvah to trample over his body. I wasn't there. I don't know how many people davened in the shul and how big they were, but it could be life-threatening. So that's number 5. He needs to lie on the floor, and people will step on his body when they go in and when they go out. First year, his seat should be ma'achorei deles beis hakneses, and that is just to humiliate him. And that's part of his tikkunei tshuva. Once a month, he needs to visit the cemetery and go to the kever of the Rav, whose demise he brought about indirectly, with a minyan, and ask for mechila, slicha, v'kapora. The entire year, he shouldn't go to any simcha, any suda, even a sudas mitzvah. No trips, no fun, for the entire year. First 3 years, he should fast bahab, and 5 years, he should drink no alcoholic beverages, besides Shabbos and Yom Tov, B'Kiddush v'Avdolah. Every Monday, B'tzino, not B'Faresia, the Shamish should give him Malchus Lametes. Quite a harsh judgment. So of all the stories we find, Tzemach Tzedek, Ponem Iris, Ramah, Marshal, I think Dafka, the story of the Maram Alablin, the person wasn't to blame at all. We don't know the background. We don't know why the Rav was so frightened. Was it called for or not? We don't know. But the person meant no harm, just came to speak to the Rav. And the Maram was aware of the tshuva of the Marshal, so I don't know why he's so machmir, but that's the psak of Maram Alablin. So, before I say what my psak was, I just think that when we learn all these tshuvas, we could appreciate and understand how chomer it is to bring about, in a totally indirect way, without any bad intentions, the demise of a person. And I think it just brings to mind how careful we all need to be in this period. So I think when people don't distance themselves from each other and they don't wear masks, and it's an awesome responsibility, because you might bring about the demise of a person. And you will never know about it. If you would know about it, you would go to a Rav. You would lay on the floor every day in the morning, 3 times a day, and people will trample over your body. If you would know about it, you would fast 40 days, but you might never even know about it. Shalom alei nafshi. And you're going to have fun. And you're going to go to the park. And you're going to have a hell of a good time. And you will never know that a family is bereaved. And they lost a loved one. Maybe they lost a provider out of your recklessness. So just come to think of it, I shudder when I just say it. So this once again, I think it's needless to say that we need al pi Torah to follow the rules. Follow the rules. So the government in Israel said we could go back to shuls, but I'm a big machmer in pikuach nefesh, and I question the halachic judgment of Misrad Abriyut. I wouldn't rely on them in Hilchas Shabbos or in many other halachas, and I think they're not enough machmer in pikuach nefesh. But nevertheless, yes, we'll be happy to go back to shul. We'll be happy. We miss the shul, and the shul will be happy to see us. Believe me, our shuls miss us, and the yeshivas miss us as much as we miss them. But we will adhere to all the rules and all the precautions. And if the government says you need 2 meters between one person and another, I will demand 3 meters. So, when we learn this sugya, and we learn the tshuvas of the Gedolim, we see most of them were machmir b'yoisar. Even in a case in which the person did nothing wrong, but you brought about the demise of another person. So my psak halocha l'maisa regarding the story I told you was twofold. So if the person that brought about the infection of others, and he transmitted this virus to others, but he was a oines gamor. He wasn't supposed to be in isolation. He wasn't aware that he carries the virus. He wasn't supposed to be aware. No one in his family was ill, and it is only in retrospect that he fell ill, and probably he transmitted the virus to others. He still needs somewhat of a kapara. It's no different than Maharivail or Maram Melublin. But in later generations, Gedolei Yisrael taught us that we need to focus and stress more on the positive aspects of Tikkunei Tshuva. Not on fasting, not on Sigufim, not on Golus, Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. But nevertheless, Poto B'li Klum Yefshar, I would say he should fast every Erev Rosh Chodesh and say Yom Kippur Kol. If he has difficulty fasting, v'yesh v'zeh bitul maleches shomayim, and he can't learn properly or daven properly, he should fast till after Chatzos. Say Yom Kippur Kol. If he was irresponsible, like the question that I presented at the beginning of today's year and the last year, a family member was ill. He shouldn't have gone to work, but he did. He didn't mean bad, but he bears more responsibility. He should have been more careful. In that case, I say he should fast Erev Rosh Chodesh first year. Even if it's difficult, he should be mashlim the tzayim. Every year, he should fast on that sad day, on that tragic day in which he brought about the death of another person. All his years, on that day, he should be makabel on atzmai tzayim. He should give tzedakah and learn Torah le'ilui nishmosoi. That's his tikkun. Should give tzedakah. If his family is needy, support the family, and he should learn and daven le'ilui nishmosoi. I also think that bedover shekilkel yetaken. I think he should be makpid and bikur choilem, nichum avelem, support Hatzalah, be oisik in atzolas nefoshes, and that once again is a tikkun for the chait of ibud nefesh.